Excellent. So good morning, folks. So nice to see people who I had the great opportunity to be in the learning community with yesterday. Welcome back to another talk today about change talk is motivational gold. We will give it just a few more minutes and then we will officially go ahead and get started. And for those of you whom I've had the opportunity to be in a learning community with before, please take this opportunity to type your full name into the chat. And if you are sharing your computer with anybody else, please type their full names into the chat too. I want to make sure that everybody who's with us today gets credit. Excellent. And so nice to see so many people who were here yesterday joining us today. And for those of you who didn't know what the learning community conversation was yesterday, it was an overview of the evidence-based practice of motivational interviewing. And it was a very brief 1 hour overview. And it's interesting because what we're going to focus on today is a very specific facet of the practice of motivational interviewing called change talk. And I'll say this again when we officially get started, but I'll just say it now, that I developed this particular learning community conversation because in my own experience of being trained and practicing motivational interviewing, my feeling, and this is just my 2 cents, I'm making an I statement here, my feeling is that this aspect of the practice of motivational interviewing, which is change talk, was often passed over and ignored during trainings. It would be mentioned, but ultimately there would be no real in-depth sort of understanding. And I will share a personal perspective, which is, to me, if we have the understanding of what change talk is and its relationship, its important place, and I would go so far as to say its centrality to the practice of motivational interviewing, you can actually be more effective in your use of this evidence-based practice. So I'll kind of repeat that maybe in a shorter hand when we go forward, but we're going to give it just a couple of more minutes to let anybody join us. We have about 43 people in the learning community, so we'll give it just one more minute, and then we will go ahead and get started. And just to let you know, folks, this is a 2 hour learning community conversation, and I will do my best to try and leave some time at the end to let you complete the brief evaluation. Sometimes I'm more effective at leaving time at the end than others, but I'll do my best to try and make sure that you can move on to your next appointment. Just one more moment, and then we will go ahead and get started. Wonderful. More people who were here from yesterday. Fantastic. I will also say, and I did say this yesterday, and I'll just repeat it for those who were here yesterday, in May, near the end of May, we are going to do a 6 hour deeper dive, more in-depth review and opportunity to practice motivational interviewing. And again, we will do that at the end of May. In mid-May, I have to travel for work, for doing some training abroad, but I'm back mid-May, and we'll try and schedule it in. And it'll be 3 2 hour sessions. So it'll be 6 hours total, 3 2 hour sessions. So it's funny, an hour yesterday is a very brief amount of time, and 2 hours for this particular topic is also particularly brief. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And just by way of a brief introduction, let me say welcome and welcome back to anybody whom I've had the opportunity to be in a learning community conversation with before. My name is Paul Warren, and I am currently a research project director at the New York State Psychiatric Institute, and I am also very fortunate to be a senior staff trainer and curriculum writer for the Northeast and Caribbean Addiction Technology Transfer Center. And that does mean, folks, that there are times when I am forced to go to Puerto Rico, St. Thomas, or St. Croix to deliver training. It's been a really long time since I've been forced to do that, though. I'm also a social worker by training. I'm a graduate of Hunter College School of Social Work, and I began my social service career providing direct services to people living with HIV and AIDS in 1991. And I did that for a little over 12 years when I actually went to social work school and became a clinician because of that work. I then made a transition in 2003 to focus specifically on workforce development and the provision of technical assistance, which is what I get the opportunity to do now. Okay. Very, very grateful to have the opportunity to be in a learning community conversation with you today about specifically change talk. And I'll tell you, it's for very selfish reasons, because every time that I have the opportunity to engage in this conversation, my understanding of change talk gets refined and intensified. So I'm really looking forward to our opportunity to talk about this together. Again, we will take care of a couple of logistical details, and then we will dive right into the content. Time permitting, I also have a very brief video that I want to show you. And I want to show you this particular video because A, there are examples of change talk in it, and I want to plant a foundational concept for you. And the slides will bear this out as we go forward, but I want to plant this concept at the very beginning, which is that change talk must be employed in order to get the full impact of it. I'm going to say that again. That change talk must be employed in order to get the full benefit of it. Now, related to that, if you think about that statement, and again, it may seem murky because you may not actually be sure of what change talk is, and nobody's going to leave here today without having a very robust understanding of what change talk is. The thing to consider about that statement is that change talk is a kind of speech that actually can help a person move toward change and increase their motivation. Now, let me say, if Ricardo and I were in a conversation that Ricardo had a particular behavioral change goal that he was ambivalent about, and we were talking about that, and Ricardo offered change talk in regard to that behavior, there would be benefit in that. Simply the fact that Ricardo offered that change talk, there would be benefit. When you're practicing motivational interviewing, you can increase that benefit, strengthen that benefit, intensify that benefit by then employing the change talk that Ricardo offered. Now, the image that I want to give to you in regard to that is don't leave money on the table. If somebody offers change talk about a behavioral change goal that they're ambivalent about, employ it, put it to work to intensify and magnify the benefit. And if you really think about it, folks, and we're going to touch on this as we go forward, I just wanted to plant this concept. If you really think about it, that is what makes motivational interviewing unique, is the employment, the evocation, and then the employment of change talk. That's what makes it unique. So just keep that in mind as this foundational concept. If you're practicing motivational interviewing and Ricardo offers change talk, employ that change talk in order to get the maximum benefit you can get out of it. Okay? And there's a way to do that where you can just be having a conversation with somebody. It's an intentional conversation. It's a selective conversation. I see Janet nodding her head. It's a selective conversation. And it's very different than client-centered counseling. It has a relationship, but it's different. And it's very different than just regular conversation. It's intentional and it's selective. Now, don't misunderstand that, folks. That does not mean that it's manipulative. And we'll touch on that as we go forward. Okay. Some people, I love it sometimes when I'm in trainings, either online or in person. Sometimes people, like, you'll see this light bulb go off in their head and they'll say, oh, well, MI is a way to manipulate people, right? And I'm like, no, let's back up a minute. That's exactly not what it is. So having said that, folks, it just is planting that foundational concept. Employ change talk in order to get its maximum benefit. Consider that our baseline. I'm going to share my screen. We'll take care of a couple of learning community objectives or guidelines, and then we will go deeper into building our understanding and our relationship to change talk. Before I share my screen, though, let me just say this, and I'll repeat it. Anytime you have a comment, a question, information you want to share, do not hesitate to unmute. I do my best to watch the chat, but sometimes the chat is active and things get lost. So if there's something you want to say, if there's something you want to add, if you want to share a reaction or share information, just unmute. Interrupt me at any moment. Okay, I don't mind that. I'm going to share my screen. And let me also say that a couple of things to keep in mind in terms of our guidelines. When you registered for this learning community conversation, everybody was invited and asked to please have an active camera and an active microphone. So if you're able to turn your camera on, please do so. Please be on camera for the entire time. Having said that, though, if you need to step away and you need to take care of something, feel free to do so. Just send me a private message. Let me know that you're stepping away. And then we'll go on from there. Come back. Now, keep in mind, folks, stepping away means I'm stepping away for a few moments. It doesn't mean I'm stepping away for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, or that's stepping out. Step away, don't step out. As I said before, you are welcome to interrupt me at any time that you want to. This is meant to be a learning community conversation. And what we may talk about may not necessarily reflect the official views of our funder. And that's perfectly okay. You don't need to worry about that. It's meant to be relevant and supportive of what your needs are around this particular topic. I do need to make a disclaimer. The topic of this conversation is Change Talk is Motivational Gold. We are focusing on one facet of the evidence-based practice of motivational interviewing. We're not focusing on the whole practice. So if you're interested in a larger, broader, deeper discussion about motivational interviewing as a whole, please do feel free to attend the 6-hour training that we're going to be doing in the end of May. Also, the goal of our learning community conversation is not necessarily for all of us to land on the same page or in agreement. It's perfectly okay to share different perspectives, different information, and different ideas about this particular topic. That's welcome here. What I would ask, though, is if John has the floor and John is making a point, please don't interrupt John. Let John finish. And if you want to add something, that's great. You're more than welcome to. I'll do my best to make sure that people have time to do that. As I said, you can interrupt me. You shouldn't worry ever about doing that. Okay. And I think that covers our guidelines. So can everybody agree to those guidelines? Yeah. Excellent. Good. You can wave, you can nod, you can give me a thumbs up, you can throw money. Excellent. Perfect. You can type a Y in the chat. You can sign in blood, whatever works for you. Perfect. All right. We are going to talk specifically about change talk as it relates to and is part of the practice of motivational interviewing. And the thing to keep in mind in regard to that is one of the things that we are paying the most attention to when we are practicing motivational interviewing is what the client is saying. And the practice of motivational interviewing is what they are saying about an identified behavioral change goal. And the thing to keep in mind about that, folks, is what they're saying about a behavioral change goal is what we would frame as and what we would call the language of ambivalence. And I want you to take a moment and I want you to look at my hands. You'll notice on this side of my hand, there is a ring. On this side, there is not. And I want you to think about the language of ambivalence is having two sides. Side one with the ring is what's called change talk. Side two without the ring is what is called sustain talk. They're both sides of the language of ambivalence. Now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute because I just want to ask the learning community a question, and then I have the slides. I want to share them with you. But this is the question that I want to ask everybody. And if somebody would be willing to unmute and give their definition, it would be greatly appreciated. If you were, in your own words, to define the word, and we are going to send the slides, by the way, Demetra, we will definitely send the slides. We'll share them with you. You can use them any way you want. But if you were going to define ambivalence in your own words, how would you define it? And Janet, Billette, I'm wondering if you'd be willing, if you're willing, I mean, you can pass if you don't want to, but if you'd be willing, how would you define ambivalence? What does ambivalence actually mean?
Sure, absolutely. Wanting to do something, but then not wanting to do something. Like with the people I work with, I really want to get clean, but then I really want to keep using. So, on one hand, you want to do something, and on the other hand, you really don't want to do it.
Fantastic. The thing, yep, ambivalence is fear of the unknown. It absolutely can be. Absolutely. And Janet, thank you for connecting the ambivalence to a behavioral change goal. If there's a second thing you walk away with from our learning community conversation today, and hopefully there'll be more than two, but if there's a second thing, yes, there can be hesitance with ambivalence, but if there's a second thing that you walk away with, and by all means, if somebody else wants to share their definition of ambivalence, that would be great. If there's a second thing you walk away with, folks, please walk away with this, that ambivalence, change talk, and sustain talk, the language of ambivalence is normal. It's normal. It's not the same thing as resistance. And let me give you a concrete example, okay? And Angelica says, my supervisor makes me write down 3 things that I take from the class. Yes. Well, thing one is that we want to employ change talk. Thing two, thing two, ambivalence about a behavioral change is normal. Okay. It's not the same thing as resistance. Okay. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm having a conversation with a young gentleman, and the young gentleman says to me, well, I smoke weed on a daily basis because it's how I feel comfortable in my skin. And it's the way I hang out with my buddies. We get together for lunch, we smoke a little bit, and then I go back to work. My boss has also told me that if I make it back from lunch late one more time, he's going to fire me. And my girlfriend has also told me that when I'm stoned, she says I disrespect her. That's what the young gentleman says to me. Now, I want to underline a couple of things in regard to that. Thing one, there's an identified behavioral change goal that the young gentleman is thinking about. And it's about cutting down the amount of marijuana he's smoking on a daily basis. So everybody, ka-ching. That means that we have the opportunity to practice motivational interviewing. There's an identified behavioral change goal. Thing two, it's an identified behavioral change goal where there's change talk involved in what he said, and there's sustained talk involved in what he said. So he's ambivalent about the change. Part of him wants to make the change, another part of him wants to stay the same. Okay? Now, hopefully, you're remembering what I said in the beginning is the foundational concept of that we want to, yes, Basharat, it is definitely mixed feelings. And Silver says ambivalence includes cognitive dissonance in my personal definition. I would agree with you 100%, Silver. And Silver, tell me if you're okay with this. I'm going to add that ambivalence has nothing to do with logic a lot of the time. Not necessarily intellectual. It's not logical, but it's meaningful to the person who's experiencing the ambivalence. Okay. It's not always logical, but it's meaningful. And in MI, we seek to understand the person's meaning. Now, it's interesting because many of us have been trained that, well, if we just educate the person enough, they'll change. That often backfires because sometimes that education, quote unquote, is unwelcome and it causes the person to push back. And that is when we actually are evoking resistance. So I just want to connect what the young gentleman told me is there's change talk on the table that he naturally offered. And I would call that naturally occurring change talk. Okay. NOCT, naturally occurring change talk. Okay. If I'm practicing motivational interviewing, I want to put that change talk to work. The young gentleman said it once. I want to put it to work. Keep that in mind. We're going to go forward. So just keep that in mind. I want to put that change talk to work. And hopefully, as you're keeping it in mind, you're thinking about how would you put it to work? If you were going to put that change goal, that change talk to work, how would you put it to work? So just keep that in mind. I'm not asking you to give an answer yet, but I'm just asking you to keep that in mind. Okay? All right, I'm going to share my screen and show you the slides. I hope. I'm pretty sure I'm going to. All right, folks. So change talk is motivational gold. We've gone through our logistics. Again, if you haven't done so yet, please make sure you've typed your full name into the chat. We have 67 people in the learning community. We've agreed to the guidelines. You've already given me the thumbs up and thrown money, which is fantastic. I will underline one thing in regard to the purpose of this learning community conversation. Is that I want you to consider that by employing the change talk, not leaving that money on the table, we are actually strengthening it. We're making it stronger, and it's increasing somebody's motivation. It's their motivation, but through our employment of that change talk, their motivation is actually strengthened. If we don't employ it, we're throwing away an opportunity to help that person move closer to their change. And again, that's the unique wrinkle with the practice of motivational interviewing, that it helps us to strengthen that person's motivation, their motivation. Again, we're going to talk about the relationship between ambivalence and motivational interviewing. We already have started to. And there are two types of change talk. There's preparatory change talk, and then there's mobilizing change talk. And some folks may remember that from yesterday's learning community conversation. We'll underline those again. And my hope is, time permitting, we're going to have the opportunity, in addition to watching that video, we may even be able to have a live demonstration, real play. So just, I'm putting that on the table, time permitting, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed. We're talking about ambivalence now. Don't read this definition. Think about the definitions that we've talked about in terms of what ambivalence is. I think what we've talked about already is perhaps more colorful and more realistic than this. Now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute because I hope you're not reading that definition. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute, and I want to ask, does anybody recall, because keep in mind, folks, that the practice of motivational interviewing is about listening and deep listening. Does anybody recall, and would you be willing to unmute and verbalize, what is the behavioral change goal that the young gentleman is thinking about? Does anybody recall what that was? And I gave the language that he shared with us, his language of ambivalence. Does anybody remember what that behavioral change goal was? Would you be willing to unmute and just share it with the learning community?
I mean, it sounds like he wants to stop smoking or at least cut down on smoking.
Yes, yes. And let's be very clear. And I love the fact that, Chelsea, you're kind of looking at it broadly. And Johanna also has mentioned to stop smoking weed. The goal, as he put it, was that he wants to cut down. Who knows? He may want to stop at some point, but his goal is a harm reduction goal. He wants to cut down. One side of change talk, another side is sustain talk. Yes, change talk, sustain talk. And in the language of ambivalence that that young gentleman shared with us, he gave us both. Okay? He gave us some change talk and he gave us some sustain talk. That's fantastic that people are already kind of connecting that. Reduce, yes, Carol, reduce the amount of weed that he's smoking. And again, at least at this moment in the conversation, and I appreciate what Chelsea and others are suggesting, at least at this moment in the conversation, his goal is simply to cut down. It's not to quit. And let me underline, folks, in regard to the practice of motivational interviewing, a harm reduction goal, a cutting down, is okay. It's acceptable. It's perfectly okay. And it's important to keep that in mind because that's what the young gentleman has told us. That's the goal that he's laid out. And Chelsea, would it be okay if I asked you a follow-up question? Okay. So and I'm asking everybody this, but I want to ask Chelsea about it because you unmuted to share what the goal was. And my question to you is I'm asking you to think hypothetically for a moment. If you were the young gentleman and I said to you, because let's say what I really want for the young gentleman, because I think it's going to be better for him, I want him to quit completely. Okay. Because I care, not because I'm a bad person or controlling, but because I care, I want him to quit completely. If I was to, and Chelsea, the question I'm asking you is if I was to say to the young gentleman, well, it would really be better for you if you just quit altogether. Janet is shaking her head like, no, don't go there. So, but Chelsea, if I said that, what do you imagine? And we're going to check in with Janet in a minute, but what do you imagine might be the young gentleman's response?
I think there's going to be a lot of resistance. I mean, he came there saying that he wanted to cut down, not quit.
That's right.
And
That's
so
right.
if you're not going to listen to me, we're not having the same conversation.
Yeah, and so beautifully put. I love the way you said that. We're not having the same conversation. You're here and I'm here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there comes to be a judgment that, you're going to end up having with that. So.
Yep. 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 And judgment is a wonderful way to pour water on the flowers of resistance.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Janet, I did notice that you shook your head when I said that. So did you have a particular reaction that you might want to share?
It's just kind of putting our will onto theirs. We need to meet them where they're at. And they're bringing up wanting to cut back, then that's where we have to meet them.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you 100%. And if it's okay, can I ask you a quick follow-up question?
Sure.
I agree with you 100%. Would it be fair to say, though, that if I do really care and I want the best for this guy, and if I in my heart of hearts believe that he'd be better off quitting, is it possible that as a provider, I might actually say what I said to him? Do you think there are providers that actually might say to that young gentleman? So I'm not just making that up. That's just not crazy.
Yeah, but would the person come back and see you that for a follow-up? Maybe not.
Bingo. Bingo. And I'll go back. Thank you, Janet. And I'll go back to what? I'll go back to it. Yes, it's demotivation. Thank you, Jennifer. Everybody write that down. Janet has just coined a new phrase. It is demotivation. Yes, it is. I'm kicking you out the door motivation. Yeah. And that's not what we want. And Chelsea, I love again the way you put it. We're not in the same conversation. And with the practice of motivational interviewing, folks, we want to be in the same conversation. And to Janet's point and others, we want to meet the person where the person is at. Yeah. Okay, great. And Catherine writes, acceptance is part of MI consistent approach. It absolutely is, Catherine, 100%. And for extra credit, Catherine or anybody else, what are the other three remaining parts of an MI consistent approach? Yes, acceptance is one of them. There's P, A, which is acceptance, C, and E. Does anybody remember? Yes.
Collaboration and evocation.
Actually, Janet, fascinating. Evocation has been changed.
Oh, it has in the new book?
In the new book, it's now empowerment.
Oh.
And partnership.
Yeah, it's partnership, acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. PACE. Yep, that's exactly it. PACE. Yeah, and Janet, it used to be evocation. In the fourth edition of Bill Miller and Stephen Rolnick's book, it has now been changed to empowerment. Yeah. And it's interesting for those MI nerds among us. I consider myself one. Evocation is still part of the four tasks. Formerly, Janet called the 4 processes. Now they're called the 4 tasks. But we're not going to get into that at this particular moment. Come to the 6-hour training and find out about the 4 tasks. All right, yes. And Rebecca writes it again in the chat, which is wonderful. Partnership, acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. PACE. And keep in mind, folks, that is not the practice of motivational interviewing. That is an am I consistent approach. It's a way of being with somebody in the conversation. So to Chelsea's point, we can be in the same conversation. An am I consistent approach will help you with that. All right. And if there's a third thing you take away, which is not really part of this training, but I'm going to throw it in there anyway, I will repeat that an am I consistent approach is appropriate for any and every conversation that you have. And the practice of motivational interviewing is not. An am I consistent approach is appropriate for any and every conversation that you have. The practice of motivational interviewing is not. The practice of motivational interviewing is used when there's an identified behavioral change goal that the person feels ambivalent about. Part of them wants to do it, another part of them wants to stay the same. And you can evoke change talk and then put that change talk to work, employ it. So whoever needed the 3 things that they need to take back to their supervisor, thing 3, you can take that back. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. So just to underline a couple of things about ambivalence, remember, folks, that it's common. It is also normal. It is not the same thing as resistance. I'm going to say that again, but I needed to say it now. It's also part of the human experience. It's pretty normal as human beings to feel ambivalence. It's also part of the change process. If someone is truly considering a change that they actually feel ambivalent about, it's part of that change process. So actually, it's a good thing. It is not resistance. And what I'd like everybody to do, and I asked everybody to do this yesterday, what I'd like everybody to do is type the word, and there are 67 of us in the learning community. I'd like everybody to type the word opportunity into the chat. Or if you don't want to type the whole word, you can simply type OPP. But I'd like everybody to do that. And I'd like you, if there's a 4th thing to take away from this learning community conversation, is ambivalence about a specific behavioral change goal is an opportunity to practice motivational interviewing. And thank you to the 34 people who have typed OPP or opportunity into the chat. Let's try and get everybody, all 68 of us in the learning community, to do that. Just as a quick underline, remembering, again, we have an MI consistent approach, and we also have the practice of motivational interviewing. The practice of MI is a client-centered conversation focused on a particular behavioral change goal that the person feels ambivalent about. Just like our young gentleman, part of him wants to cut down the amount of weed he's smoking on a daily basis, and another part of him wants to keep smoking the amount of weed that he is currently smoking. If we are practicing motivational interviewing during this opportunity to practice it, we are actually guiding that conversation to help the young gentleman explore and express his ambivalence about the change he's considering. And we are inviting him to share his change talk, his motivations, his desire, his ability, his reasons, or his need to cut down the amount of weed that he's smoking. And by doing that, him expressing it, and then us employing it, that then becomes the practice of motivational interviewing, because we're helping him to explore and resolve his ambivalence about that specific change goal. It's not just free floating ambivalence, it's ambivalence about that change goal. And we're helping him to identify his motivations to want to make that change. Now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a minute because I want to ask the learning community a question. I shared the language of ambivalence that the young gentleman shared with us. Now, I'm going to ask a very specific question, and I'm going to ask whoever would like to unmute to respond if you recall. What did the young gentleman tell us about why he's considering cutting down the amount of weed that he's smoking? What did he tell us about why he's considering cutting down the amount of weed? So what I'm really asking you folks is, from what the young gentleman told us, what is the change talk? What was his change talk? Go ahead, Jody, go ahead.
Because first of all, his job is in jeopardy. Returning late from lunches and being high. And another one is his girlfriend, how he's being obnoxious with her when he is using.
Fantastic. I'm going to use my reactions, which I don't often do, but I'm going to use my reactions because I want us all to give Jody a round of applause. And Jody, the reason I want us to give you a round of applause, thank you, Amanda. The reason I want us to give Jody a round of applause is because, Jody, you have totally hit the change talk on the head. And you've also identified, if we were practicing motivational interviewing with this young gentleman, that's what we would want to employ. We would want to employ his change talk. So Jody has just given us the direction of our employment. Okay? And again, the thing I want you to be thinking about, based on what Jody just shared with us, the thing I want you to be thinking about is how you would employ that change talk that Jody just identified for us. And Jody, thank you so much. And if you don't mind, can I share a reaction to what you offered? That would be okay? The thing I wanted to underline also in terms of what Jody shared with us is, Jody, it was clear to me by the way you repeated the change talk back that you were also hearing the deeper meaning to the young gentleman of what he was communicating.
I work with a lot of people that are like this, that homeless individuals trying to get clean and get housing, and yeah.
Fantastic. Well, again, I want to affirm your deep listening, because I want to underline, folks, that that's to Jody's advantage in terms of how she would then employ the change talk, because she has a deep understanding of what it may mean to this person. And I could hear that in the way you said it, and I could also hear it in your tone of voice. So I just wanted to underline that, because it was non-judgmental, it was compassionate, and it was respectful. So I thank you for allowing me to underline your excellent practice, Jody.
No problem. Yep.
Yeah. So Jody has identified the change talk that we would employ. Now, I do want to ask, because remember, change talk is part of the language of ambivalence. Sustained talk is the other part of it. The young gentleman also shared some sustained talk with us, and that's not bad. It's normal. It's the language of ambivalence. We would not necessarily employ that though, but we would pay attention to it. So my question to somebody, if you'd be willing to unmute like Jody was, if you'd be willing to unmute, again, we're going to attend to it, but we're not going to employ it the same way. Does anybody recall the sustain talk that the young gentleman offered us? Does anybody recall what he told us?
Was it getting together with his friends for lunch every day?
Yep, absolutely. And there was one other piece of it.
It helped him feel normal in his skin.
You got it. Thank you. The A's have it. That's it. That was all of it. And it's important for us to understand that and hear that and attend to it, to listen to it. We're not going to employ it necessarily. We are going to employ what Jody shared with us. Okay? Fantastic. That was it. We got the change talk and we got the sustain talk. We want to hear both sides and we're going to employ. And I want to underline, folks, and I appreciate your indulgence if this feels overly simplistic, but I really want to thank you for your patience that we are really defining this language of ambivalence, because I want to underline for you, if you walk away with this, you're going to be able to practice motivational interviewing in so much more meaningful and effective of a way. I cannot tell you how many audio recordings that I've listened to where there's been some NOCT, naturally occurring change talk, and the worker has left the money on the table. They've not employed it. I'm going to go so far as to also share with you that I've listened to many audio recordings where the worker has skillfully evoked change talk, has invited the person to offer change talk. And guess what? They responded and they offered the change talk. And Stephanie knows where I'm going with this, don't you, Stephanie? They left that money on the table too. So they went so far as to like evoke the change talk, and then they didn't do anything with it. They left it there. Now, don't misunderstand me. There's benefit in evoking the change talk. You increase the benefit, intensify the benefit, strengthen the motivation by then following Jody's directions by employing it. So if everybody walks away with not leaving the money on the table, that's going to help your MI practice. And that's what I'm here for. I want to support you effectively using this evidence-based practice. And it really does, it has to do with how you evoke and employ or respond to NOCT, naturally occurring change talk. All right. I'm going to share my screen again. We've been very clear. And if you could just use the chat to confirm by using a Y that you can see me, hear me, and see the slide at the same time, that would be fantastic because I can't see you at this point. I just want to make sure. Fantastic. Good. I usually check earlier, but I want to just make sure. So we've talked about the language of ambivalence. Remember, you can think of it as the two sides of my hand, one with the ring, one without the ring, or you can think of it as a gold coin. We've already identified that sustain talk is socializing with his friend during lunch, hanging out with them. Sustain talk, how he feels most comfortable or how he feels comfortable in his own skin. It's not wrong. It's not bad. It's just part of the language of ambivalence. Change talk, on the other hand, the ring side, is he's potentially going to lose his job if he makes it back late from lunch one more time. He could be jeopardizing his relationship with his girlfriend, and he may have, very strong feelings for his girlfriend and want to be in the relationship. So that is the change talk side of the little example that we have. And hopefully what you're pondering is the employment of that change talk, how we would actually employ it. And I have an acronym that can help you remember about employing the change talk. Now, I said earlier that there are two types of change talk because this learning community conversation is focused. Change talk is motivational gold. Sometimes I refer to this in shorthand as change talk is MOGO, motivational gold. There's preparatory change talk. There's change talk that the person is naturally offering or that we can evoke from that person. That is helping to identify their desire, their ability, their reasons, or their need to make this change. And that acronym is DARN, and we mentioned this yesterday as well. But that's what we call preparatory change talk. And that's where the person is verbalizing and then hopefully through our employment, reconsidering their own desirability, reasons, and need to make this change, which is hopefully strengthening their motivation. When the person has evoked DARN, desire, ability, reasons, and need, the desire to cut down the amount of weed that they're smoking, the ability to cut down the amount of weed they're smoking, the reasons to cut down the amount of weed they're smoking, or the need to cut down the amount of weed they're smoking. Now, the reason I said that 4 times, in addition to underlining desirability, reasons, and need, is because I want you to keep in mind, folks, that change talk is in relation to the change that the person is considering. It's specific, it's not general. When a person has evoked, or when a person has offered, and we've evoked enough change talk, the person's language about the change that they're considering will evolve, it will grow, it will start to change, it will make a transition. Thank you for letting me know, Jody. Hopefully we'll see you again next time. It will make a transition into what we call as a different type of change talk called mobilizing change talk. And the way that you can remember that is with the acronym CATS, C-A-T-S. And what that stands for is commitment, activation, and taking steps. So there's preparatory, DARN, desirability, reasons, and need. And then when there's enough change talk, the person often will evolve into mobilizing change talk where they'll start to say things like, I'm going to cut down the amount of weed that I'm smoking. I will cut down the amount of weed that I'm smoking. That's commitment. Activation is, one of the ways that I can cut down the amount of weed that I'm smoking is I'll go with my lunch with my friends only twice a week as opposed to 4 times a week. That could potentially be a way. And that would be activation where they're developing a plan. Taking steps might be, something? I wanted to report to you that since I saw you last, I only went to lunch with my buddies twice, and I actually have cut down. That would be taking steps. So that's mobilizing change talk. And this, I mentioned this yesterday, but I'll underline it here. That is actually when a person starts to offer mobilizing change talk, it's very important to stop evoking preparatory change talk, because if you continue to evoke preparatory change talk. And again, this is something that through your practice, through feedback and reflection on your practice, you would come to realize. But the downside when a person is offering mobilizing change talk of continuing to evoke preparatory change talk is that you're actually demotivating the person. You're holding them back. So it's very important to train your ear to hear these two different types of change talk. And I do have a slide here that basically just lays out for you desirability, reasons, and need, preparatory, and mobilizing or implementing change talk, CATS, commitment, activation, and taking steps. And for extra credit, does anybody know? Oh, thank you, Kristen. Thanks for letting me know. Does anybody know, and you can type it in the chat, does anybody know which ancient Greek god this is a picture of? I happen to like cats, but this is also, I thought it was appropriate for this. So if you know what, I'm going to see somebody just put in the chat. Yes, I believe. Chelsea writes Basset. Jessica writes Freya. I actually thought it was Bast. Artemis. I think it's Bast, but I'm not sure how to spell that. So maybe it's spelled like Basset. I'm not sure. Yes, it's an Egyptian goddess. Yes. And you'll notice the scarab, the winged scarab around Bast's neck. Excellent. So, folks, there are a number of tools that we can use in order to actually, I think it's Bast. I don't think it's Ra. But there are a number of tools that can be, and just as extra credit, does anybody know where this image is from? And I will say to you, it's from a childhood favorite of mine. And again, there may be many people in our learning community who don't know where this image is from. But if you know where this image is from next to importance, confidence, and readiness, please put it in the chat. Land of Misfit Toys, Santa. Yes, it is from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And it's Yukon Cornelius. Rick, wonderful. Excellent. Yes, it's from Rudolph. Fantastic. Good. Glad to know you're awake out there. I knew you were awake anyway, but there are a number of strategies, folks, that can be used to intentionally evoke change talk. Remember, and there's a slide that says this earlier, but there's naturally occurring change talk, like the change talk that the young gentleman offered us. And then we can also evoke change talk. We can intentionally use strategies and modified types of questions in order to evoke change talk. And there's a strategy that can be used that in and of itself is not MI, but it can be used to evoke change talk, which is called the importance, confidence, or readiness rulers. And let me be very clear. Like change talk, these tools are used specifically related to the behavioral change goal. And let me be very specific. If I'm using these, I might say, Harley, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not very important and 10 being very important, how important is it for you to cut down the amount of weed you're smoking on a daily basis? And again, that's if Harley was that character. Okay? I'm not suggesting Haley in our training, but if that was so, and let me also apply the other questions. So on that same scale, Harley, 1 being not very confident and 10 being extremely confident, how confident are you that you can cut down the amount of weed that you're smoking on a daily basis? And then the third question would be, on that same scale, 1 being not very ready and 10 being extremely ready, Harley, how ready are you to cut down the amount of weed you're smoking on a daily basis at this particular time? So the importance, confidence, and readiness rulers are used in relation to the change goal that the person is considering that they're ambivalent about. Now, when you use this strategy, there is a particular, I don't like the word algorithm. I mean, I do like the word. I don't like it applied to this because it's a conversation, but there is a certain, and I'm going to use the word, there's a certain algorithm to how we guide the conversation using this strategy. And I want to walk you through the algorithm. I just want to walk you through it so that you understand the rationale for the algorithm. And I will also underline, folks, none of these questions are on a scale of 1 to 10. How motivated are you to cut down the amount of weed you're smoking? 1 being not very motivated and 10 being extremely motivated. That's not what these questions are. They are asking about how important is it for you? How confident do you feel that you can do it? And how ready are you to do this? Okay, just so we're very clear about that. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I believe the next slide is a breakdown of the steps, the algorithm for how we use these questions. And I just want to walk you through that because I want you to understand that there's a rationale for it. So we're going to have to sadly leave Yukon Cornelius for just a moment. The first step is that we ask the person's permission. Would it be okay if I asked you a couple of questions? And we wait for their answer. I can also tell you that I have listened to, and I don't know why I find this so charming. And I guess it's because it's so human. I have listened to so many audio recordings where the worker will say, is it okay if I ask you a question? And the participant or the client that they're asking doesn't even have a second to respond. And they'll say, well, so tell me about. So if you're going to ask permission, folks, please let the person answer. Then we would explain the scale. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not very important and 10 being extremely important, how important is it for you to cut down the amount of weed that you're smoking? Now, stylistically, oftentimes when I ask about importance, I don't do this next why not a lower number question. And again, I'm making an I statement here because that is one of our agreements. Stylistically, I often accept what the person tells me about importance. I don't ask them, why not a lower number? And that's only with importance. With confidence, I do that. Understood, Diana. Thank you for letting me know. So let me move to confidence. So let's say I was to ask Harley on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not very confident and 10 being extremely confident, how confident are you that you can cut down the amount of weed you're smoking? And let's say Harley was to say 6. What I would then say, and this is part of the algorithm, I would say, okay, so Harley, you're a 6. Why not a 5? Now, I want to pause because I want to underline why we do that. The reason we do that is A, probably Harley is not going to expect that we're going to do that. So it really invites Harley to think about it. And then asking the lower number invites the person to argue for their own change. So in essence, it's an invitation to offer change talk. And if Harley were to answer that question and offer change talk, and I'll give a concrete example so that we can stay on the same page, Chelsea. I'll offer this concrete example, which is that let's say Harley was to say, I was to say, Harley, you know, why not a 5? Because Harley said 6. Why not a 5? And Harley says, well, I've actually done it before. I've actually cut down in the past, and I was able to cut down for a full 3 months. Oh, okay, you're a 6 because you've done this in the past. You have experience cutting down. Okay, so I would employ what Harley offered me. Then I would follow it. So I'm wondering, you're a 6 currently. What might increase your confidence to a 6.5? Let me repeat that. What might increase your confidence to a 6.5? Please note, I did not say, what can we do to get you to a 10? I said, yes, solicit internal motivation, absolutely, and incremental. Change is done incrementally. And it really provides me with an opportunity to underline something here, folks. And the thing, and I hope that you'll take this, maybe this is thing 7 that you'll take away from this conversation. But the thing I hope you'll take away is that Harley could say, I'm about a 2. Or Harley could say, I'm about a 9. And the thing I want you to understand, folks, is a 9 is no better than a 2. And a 2 is no worse than a 9, because what it's about is the conversation. Don't get hung up on the number. The number is important to the individual, and we want to reflect that accurately. But a 9 is no better than a 2, and a 2 is no worse than a 9. It's the conversation about it. Okay? So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to share my screen again, and let me just underline the other steps. And of course, you'll have these slides. You would reflect the change talk, and then you would follow up with a question, a half a point higher. You would reflect their change talk, and then you conclude with a summary of their change talk at the end. Now, the question that I'd like to ask at this particular point, and we're gonna do this in a highly scientific way. My point being is that at this particular juncture, would you prefer a live demonstration, or do you want to watch a video? So if you want to watch a live demo, type LD. If you want to see the video, type V. And clearly this is highly scientific as I do my best to interpret the chat. Hold on a second. Chat. All right, let's see what we got going here. Oh, and somebody put LD or V. Oh, that just threw everything off. Okay, so at this moment, I'm seeing a lot of Vs. I'm seeing some LDs too, but I'm seeing, and maybe the people who are LD avoidant know that I'm going to ask for a volunteer. That could have something to do with it, Janet. So what I'm going to suggest that we do then is we're going to look at a particular video. And at this particular point, and time permitting, we will get to the LD, the live demonstration, but again, we might not. But what I'm going to ask you to do is just watch this video, and then we'll have a brief discussion about it afterward, okay? And of course, our conversation, and Harley, if you don't mind, after we watch the video, would you be open to my posing the jumping off question to you first? Would that be okay? Would you be willing to unmute and that would be okay? Okay, good. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Keep in mind, folks, that our raison d'etre, to use a little French, is to be focusing on change talk as motivational goal. So what I'm going to ask you to watch the video, but also pay attention to where you hear change talk. Okay? And don't worry, Harley, I'm not going to say to you like, okay, identify the change talk you heard. It's not that kind of question, okay? Thank you. All right, so hold on just a moment, folks. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, hard part's over. So the good news is no cavities.
Oh, hooray.
Yes, always happy to hear that. I do have some concerns though, because I'm seeing some irritation in your mouth and the palate that's called nicotinic stomatitis.
Oh, that sounds bad.
Yeah, it is. It's some damage to the roof of your mouth that happens from tobacco smoking. And so I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about how tobacco fits in your life right now.
Tobacco? I mean, I don't smoke cigarettes. I've never smoked cigarettes.
I do go out with my friends. We go out to bars and, we'll have a few drinks and smoke some of those little cigarillo type things. I mean, I don't even think of them as cigars, and they're certainly not cigarettes. And I mean, I'll have one or two of those in an evening with my friends, but certainly not 20 or 30 of them a day like you would with cigarettes. And that's the only thing that could possibly have anything to do with tobacco.
So you've made a decision in your life not to smoke cigarettes. It's something you didn't want to do. It sounds like you're kind of concerned about the health effects of cigarettes, but you have been smoking the little cigarillos at least one or two every time you go out.
Right, but that's just like a social thing. That's something that my friends and I do. We it's not a habit or something that I have to have, and talking about one or two when we go out for an evening, not packs of them.
Yeah, so you're not like those chain smokers. You're not smoking packs and packs a day.
No.
The amount you smoke is so minuscule you can't even imagine that it would cause any harm, and yet here it is damaging the roof of your mouth.
Well, you have a point there. Now that you mention it, I have started having one or two at work, when we have breaks, because I have a couple of friends at work that smoke, and so every time we have a break, we all go out to the break place outside, and so I go with them, and I have one of these Swisher Sweets. I like the peach flavor the best. They're so cute, but that's really only pretty recently.
So smoking has kind of become a big part of your social life now. When you go out, you're smoking, and even during breaks at work, you're smoking.
Well, yeah. Now that you say it like that, it's true. I am smoking on a daily basis.
So aside from that social aspect, what are the things you like about it?
Well, it's relaxing, and it's just nice to be with people. And when I like to go to Las Vegas, and so when we go to Vegas, it's really fun to go to the cigar bars. It's kind of sophisticated and fun, and so it's mostly a social thing.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I was a chain smoker.
Okay. How about the other side? Have you noticed any not so good things about the smoking?
Well, I was going to ask you about whitening my teeth, because I've noticed that they have more stains on them than a few years ago. And so I imagine that has something to do with the smoking.
Yeah, so we're noticing some pretty negative effects in terms of your oral health with the smoking. Are there any other things that you're concerned about?
Well, there's the expense, what with the economy and all, I've had to be careful about my money. And so there is the extra expense of, because I'm buying more of them than I used to. So the money aspect is also a concern.
So there's your oral health, there's the financial aspect. And then earlier you brought up some concerns about smoking cigarettes and how that can be harmful for you.
Oh, yeah.
Were you aware of the fact that smoking these little cigarillos, the Swisher Sweets, can have some of the same negative health effects?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, I thought of it more as a fun thing to do with my friends, certainly not a smoking habit or anything that would be harmful.
So it's kind of surprising to you that something you've been doing, and you've been doing more and more of it, is actually pretty bad for you.
Oh, yes. I checked the box on your form when you asked if I use tobacco. I checked no, because I never thought of myself as a smoker.
Well, what do you kind of make of that now that you realize that you're actually a tobacco user and that you might actually be causing some pretty serious health effects?
I'm really concerned. I mean, I don't want to develop cancer, lung cancer, or any of the awful things that happen from smoking. And, really, until this conversation, I never really thought of myself as a smoker at all. So I'm very concerned.
Well, the good news is, in terms of the nicotinic stomatitis, at the point in which you stop smoking, you can actually reverse all the negative effects that occurred. And you might also know that you can stop the progression of any other diseases that had started just by quitting smoking.
Really?
Yeah, is that something you'd be interested in?
Oh, I would. I really would, because like I said, I'm a brand new smoker. I didn't know I was a smoker until I came to see you.
Well, if you think about it on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is really don't think you could do it at all, and 10 is really confident that you could quit if you tried, where do you think you fall?
Oh, I think I'd probably be in 7 or 8. I'm pretty confident that I could stop doing this.
Okay. What made you choose 7 or 8 as opposed to a 5?
Because it's not a part of my daily life. I don't have to have a smoke when I get up in the morning. I don't smoke 20 or 30 of them a day, so it's not that much exposure, and I'm pretty confident that I could stop.
So it sounds like, just to kind of summarize, you've noticed some negative effects of the smoking. You have some concerns about health effects that could occur. There's the financial aspect, and yet you feel pretty confident that you could quit if you tried. So where do you think we should go from here?
I'd really like some more information about quitting. I mean, I've heard there's some new medications, there's some new things that can be done to help people make quitting more comfortable, and I really want to quit.
Okay, well, I'd be happy to talk to you more about that and give you some tips and advice and give you some suggestions about where you can get some support with quitting.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
I really appreciate you talking to me about this today.
Thank you.
No, thank you for watching that video. So Harley, if you're still willing, and you can pass, but if you're still willing, my question is given the focus of our learning community conversation today, why did I share that video with our learning community?
It really encompassed a lot of what you talked about, like, if not all of it. It was pretty much step by step.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And Harley, would you please confirm for everybody in the learning community that I neither have met you nor spoke to you prior to today's learning community? I mean, we have been in learning communities before, I believe, but I did not speak to you before today about this video, nor did I pay you to say what you just said.
Correct.
Thank you. At least yet. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Harley. So folks, that is to underline what Harley said. That is exactly part of the reason I showed it to you. And if sometimes seeing a highly contrasted approach is helpful for you, I just want to let you know that there is a companion video to this one. This one is called The Effective Dentist. There is a companion video if you'd like to see a highly inconsistent approach called The Ineffective Dentist. And that can be very instructive to watch because it's a wonderful example of how our desire to help and to educate evokes resistance, causes the person to offer more sustained talk, and creates a dynamic which is called discord. Meaning, if Harley and I were in this conversation, we would cease to be engaging. We would, to Chelsea's point, we would no longer be on the same page. Jennifer, as a visual learner, it connects the client-centered, yes, LED dots. Good, very good. It is everything. Oh, hold on a second. Somebody just said something in the chat too. It is everything. It is everything that I went through with you. It was very good hearing and seeing it in the video. Good. And one thing I will underline, folks, and one of the reasons I also like this video, in addition to what Harley said and what others of you were saying, the other reason that I really like this video is because, especially at the end, it is a wonderful example of employing the change talk in a summary. It's a wonderful example of employing the change talk, followed by a very MI consistent approach, open-ended question. And you might want to watch it again on your own, but let me underline, let me preview for you. The dentist is great because the dentist says, well, to kind of summarize what you said. So if you ever were concerned that you wouldn't be able to identify a summary, the dentist points out, I'm about to summarize. So it's very helpful. The dentist says, I'm going to summarize now, and here's all the change talk. And in what Miller and Rolnick call that, and they still call it, Janet, I believe even in the 4th edition, they call it a bouquet. It's putting together like a bouquet of change talk that you hand back to the person. And then it's followed with a beautiful open-ended question that respects the lady with the pearls autonomy. So given everything we've talked about, where do you think we should go from here? She gets to decide. And basically, it's a beautiful example of her offering commitment language. I want to quit. She says that. If you watch the first video, the contrast, the ineffective dentist, the dentist says, you need to quit. And it's very MI inconsistent. So if you can, watch the companion video, be prepared to be traumatized, watch the companion video, and then watch the second video, the effective dentist, and pay very close attention to the end. It's all great. And to Harley's point, it is the combination of everything we've been talking about, but you're seeing it from a different perspective because of our focus today, our focus on change talk. Having said that, I'm going to just quickly check the chat. Yes, Krista Lee, we can, I can ask my colleague when we send out the slides and everything, I can ask that we also include those links for both videos, but I will tell you, you can easily Google it on chat. If you literally type the ineffective dentist, it will pop up, and along the side, it will have the effective dentist video right there too. So you can always Google it, and I will ask my colleague, Tree Chapel, to also include the links when we send you. And by all means, share those videos if they're helpful for your colleagues as well. I find them very helpful. All right, I'm going to share my screen again and just remind you again that if you use these importance, confidence, and readiness rulers, they are in relation to a specific behavioral change goal. And I've intentionally built into the slides what the steps are. That's what those slide before with the bullets. And again, I showed you the video and we talked a little bit about what you heard. And quite honestly, we could spend the rest of our time together talking in more detail about some of the things that maybe you drew out of the videos and the video. And I'm going to suggest that we actually not do that because there's just a couple of additional points that I want to review before I want to open the floor to let you check in and leave you time to complete the evaluation. And I really do think there's benefit in you reviewing those videos, both of them, if you can, also on your own. And there is a talk tomorrow as well. I don't know if anybody's coming to that, but there is a talk. In fact, could you use the chat? Is anyone registered for the talk tomorrow? What to do with change talk once you've evoked it? Because it would be great. I mean, anybody who wants to come is welcome. Wonderful. So it looks like some people are coming. Fantastic. Good. And it's good to know that you were here today when we do that. That's fantastic. I'll look forward to seeing you there. And anybody who's not registered for that, if you want to come, please, it'd be great to see you. You're welcome. Please do come. Oh, good. Okay, great. So some people will try. Wasn't aware. Okay, Mary. Well, if you can't come tomorrow, and maybe you don't want to, but if you did want to come and you can't come tomorrow, we probably will offer that talk again as well. So before we get to your takeaway, I do just want to say, and I want to underline this, that, and it's interesting, I particularly, yes, and this recording will be available. We'll have this recording of this learning community conversation, and it won't show you, it'll just show me. But we will have this recording available to folks too. But one thing I do want to underline, folks, and it can get lost sometimes in our learning community conversations, and I think it's relevant to underline it, is that motivational interviewing is a practice, and it requires practice in order to actually become proficient at doing it. And it's also a practice that requires feedback on your practice. Yes, should we receive attendance certificates? You will receive attendance certificates in about 2 weeks after this training. So you'll get your certificate of credit hours. You will get a copy of the slides, which you are free to use and share with anybody you like. And we will do our best to also include those video links for you for those 2 videos as well. And we'll make sure you get that. I do want to underline, though, that it's a practice. And the reason I want to underline that is that it's very easy, especially with motivational interviewing, and I don't know why it's so seductive this way, but it's very easy to talk about the practice. It's very easy to describe the practice. And it's a very different thing when you actually do it. And frankly, you kind of can't, you can't practice through talking about the practice. You actually have to do it in order to become proficient at it. So what I'd like to use a few moments for, and then we'll start to draw things to conclusion, is I want to go back to the young gentleman who was considering cutting down the amount of marijuana that they were smoking. Because remember, we said that they offered change talk, and I believe it was Jody who identified very specifically the change talk, and then Amanda both identified it. I'm not pronouncing your name right, am I? Can you tell me how to pronounce it? Oh,
That's okay. It always happens. It's Amanda, like Maine.
fantastic. And I was just near Maine for the solar eclipse. Amanda. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll do my best, Amanda, to remember that. Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. So Amanda and Amanda, the 2 A's, there are probably others. Well, there's certainly Angelica. But they identified the sustain talk. And what I asked everybody to really think about was the young gentleman offered us change talk, and Jody identified it. And the question that I have for you is, if we were then speaking to that young gentleman and we were going to employ that change talk, how would we do it? What would you say next to employ that change talk that the young gentleman offered us? And keep in mind, we're talking about a scenario. It's not a real play. We're talking about a scenario. Okay? So what are your thoughts? And folks, we're in a learning community. It's perfectly okay to guess, make mistakes. Okay, so Caitlin says educate. So Caitlin, I don't know if you can unmute or not, but if you can, I would invite you, if you were going to educate, what would you say next? So if I'm the young gentleman, just speak to me, and what would you say next?
the pros and cons, protective factors, risk factors, just like the doctor did, the dentist use those, ideas and skill sets.
Okay. 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 And let me just be clear. That was kind of a description of what you do. So if I was the young gentleman and I ended with, well, my girlfriend has also told me, and notice, folks, I'm inching us toward practicing, not describing. So, and Caitlin, if you want to take me up on this, you can. If you want to pass, you can pass. But what I'm inviting you to consider is, if you and I were in a conversation, if I had the opportunity to be speaking to you and I was that young man, and I conclude with, well, my girlfriend has also told me that when I'm stoned, uh, I'm not giving her the respect she deserves.
I mean, I'm somebody, I'd ask them like, how does that make you feel?
Okay, so Amanda's jumping in and saying that she would ask an open-ended question. And again,
Right.
Amanda,
I would also do that, and also along the lines of, what do you think you would do to change that?
okay.
How do you
I
feel
think
about
even
changing?
clarifying what the issue is that causes him to be disrespectful. I know he's kind of saying it's the marijuana use, but he hasn't deliberately said that either. So I would want him to kind of clarify what is the contributing factors to you becoming disrespectful to your girlfriend? What do you see it as?
Fantastic. So let me underline here. Fantastic. And all three of you, I love it. And I love that you're all jumping in. So far, everybody so far has suggested an open-ended question, okay, of some sort or another. Silver is suggesting an open-ended question related to, like, what's the underlying cause of you treating your girlfriend that way? Amanda, you're asking a particular type of open-ended question, and Caitlin is asking a particular open-ended question. Harley is saying, could ask too, what does that, hold on a second, it just went out. I just want to make sure I see it. What does that, have to jump to the last chat. Could ask too, what does that disrespect look like? Love it. So Harley is saying, tell me about what that disrespect looks like. I want to share another phrase with you that I want you to take away, which is, you get the dog that you feed. I'm going to say it again. And then I'll tell you what I mean. You get the dog that you feed. So if Harley suggests an open-ended question, well, tell me about, what that disrespect looks like. What kind of dog are we going to get there? We're going to get more of a description about the disrespect. So it's reinforcing the disrespect, okay, in some way. And I know that's not, I'm sensing, Harley, that that's not your intention to do that. I get the sense you're not promoting disrespect. Yeah. Yeah. And Amanda, I think you said, well, how does that make you feel? Okay. So you're getting at the affective element of it. Caitlin, I think you were sort of suggesting the idea that, tell me a little bit about what you think you could do to change that. Yes? And am I pronouncing your name right? I'm not, am I? Tell me the right pronunciation, please.
Yes, you are. Well, it's Catalin, but
Catalin. Okay,
it's
well,
okay.
that's different than
I'm
Caitlin.
fine with Catalin too. It's fine.
I'm not. It's Catalin, and I want to try and get that right. Thank you. Thank you. So a couple of people are putting other things in the chat too. Can I ask you a question? So John is suggesting asking permission. How long have you been in your relationship, and how important is it to you to maintain the relationship? So John is asking permission and then asking details about this. Jennifer, assuming he doesn't mean to be disrespectful, how would we ask this? Yes. So Jennifer, I appreciate that you're not making any assumptions there. You want to kind of figure out. I want to underline something, and I have to be honest and admit, and I mean, you may not share this perspective, but I will throw this out here. I'm making an I statement. I wish we had another hour together today, because this is a great jumping off place into practice. So I want to underline something here. One, there's no one right way here. So I cannot say to you that any question or anything that anybody offered is the one right answer. So if there's a 10th thing you walk away with in regard to motivational interviewing today, there's no one right way to do it. Now, there are things that are more effective. There are things that are more intentional. There are things that are more selective. I want to come back to the dog you feed is the dog you get. And this is a very appropriate place to kind of bring this conversation to a conclusion. And that is this. We want the change talk dog. We want more change talk. We want to evoke more change talk because we want to strengthen this young gentleman's motivation. So I'm going to tell you how and I'm just one person in this learning community. There are 68 of us here today. I'm just one person in this learning community. And when I hear that young gentleman say what he said, I'm prompted to want to say this. And Catalin, if you don't mind, can I say it to you as if I'm talking to the young gentleman? I might say, Catalin, thank you for talking to me about this change that you're considering, which is cutting down the amount of weed that you're smoking on a daily basis. And if it's okay with you, could I summarize a little bit of what you said?
Yes. Yes.
You're considering making this change, cutting down the amount of weed that you're smoking because you don't want to lose your job. And you want to treat your girlfriend with the respect that she really deserves. Did I get that right?
Absolutely.
Did I leave anything out?
The question is, how am I going to do it? How will I be able to do it?
So right now, you're really thinking about the steps you'd actually take to achieve this goal.
Right.
And when you think about that, what do you see as maybe the next step for you?
Reduce my drinking.
Okay. So in that reduction, because you're clear that that's your goal, what comes first? What will you do first?
Come up with a plan, how to do that.
Okay. So having a clear plan, knowing what you're going to do is going to be beneficial for you.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So let's stop there. So the thing I want you to underline here, folks, and again, like I said, I wish we had an additional hour. We don't today. Tomorrow we do have a couple of hours. But the thing that I really want to underline here, and Catalin, thank you so much for being in that conversation. The first thing I asked, and similar to what John suggested, is I asked permission. I asked permission to do a summary. And let's put a practice label on that, folks. That's asking a closed question. And closed questions are not bad. We just use whatever we're using with intention. And I'm respecting Catalin's autonomy by letting her decide whether she wants me to summarize or not. Now, I'm just demonstrating that for you. I wanted you to see that in the demonstration. The other thing to keep in mind is the first thing I did was I just summarized the change talk. And I paused. I'm feeding the change talk dog. So I just summarized the change talk. And I said, I followed it with 3 closed-ended questions. Did I get that right? Did I leave anything out? And because Cataline offered more, I didn't have to ask the 3rd question, which was, is there anything you'd like to add? Because she did add. And it was more change talk, by the way. So by doing the summary, I did get more change talk, and then I employed it. So keep in mind, folks, that whether the change talk is naturally occurring, whether it is evoked, we want to employ it. Tune in tomorrow to find out what you do with change talk once you've evoked it. Folks, I cannot thank you enough for your participation today. I'm really hopeful, and I know a number of you are going to be there tomorrow. Fantastic. I'm really hopeful that anybody else who wants to join us will. And I will reiterate that we are going to also have an opportunity near the end of May for the 6-hour in-depth, where we will get to practice a lot more in terms of really putting it into practice. I believe, Cataline, that it's the same time tomorrow. You do need to register for that course. So if you are interested and you haven't registered already, please register. And is it already scheduled? Chelsea, and I think you're talking about the 6-hour. No, it is not currently scheduled. It will be scheduled though, and I can tell you roughly that it'll be near the end of May because I'm away in the middle of May. Actually training MI in Bulgaria. So not in Bulgarian. I don't speak Bulgarian, but I will be training MI in Bulgaria. And hopefully, if I don't see folks tomorrow, those of you that I don't have the opportunity to see, have a wonderful and safe weekend. And hopefully we'll see you in a future learning community conversation. Thank you so much for being here today. It's really been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much.